Hi, I'm Noel Salas for the Surfboard Empire. Today's a first look at the Happy Every Day by CI Surfboards. Now I'm recovering from full hip replacement surgery that I had 11 weeks ago, so it's been nearly 3 months since I've surfed. I'm frothing to get on this board, but since you guys have so many requests for this review and a bunch of others, I've started something new called the Pass It Around review. So I have my buddy Max Hoshino, who's a bone specialist. He's a surgeon that absolutely shreds. He's gonna take out my custom Happy Every Day. It's 5'5". He's roughly the same height and weight. I think you guys are gonna love this. Sit back, get your favorite drink, enjoy the show. Stoked to have Max on the show again. It's been a while since we did the Xanadu review, right?
Yeah.
But we've got the Happy Every Day. You've got a few sessions on it. Why don't you tell us how your first session was? I remember the waves being a little bit bigger.
Yep.
Were you riding it as a thruster? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so because I normally ride thrusters like on my daily kind of shortboards, I rode as a thruster with just my standard fins, and it was definitely too big for the board. It was probably like maybe, like a couple feet overhead or more. But I was super surprised at how sort of well it held. There was a little lift in the tail as a thruster, a little pivoty for those waves, but overall, once I kind of got used to it, it really performed well. It's fast and loose, and I got a couple pretty good turns where I kind of held in and felt pretty solid.
Sure.
for being a 5'5".
Right. Yeah, it's a little shorter, right? Maybe a little more rail line for you. You're such a rail surfer. Maybe like 5'7", maybe at the stock dims probably would have been a little bit better for you.
Yeah, I think that's where we, just our surfing and our preferences differ a little bit. I would have probably exactly got this board, because I normally ride a 5'9". I probably would have gone 5'7" on this.
Sure.
And this is, like we said, 5'5". So a little bit shorter, wider than what I would normally probably order from these guys.
Right. Yeah. Now, when the waves got smaller, I felt like you were ripping on this board. Did you go to a quad setup?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So we had that initial day, and sort of in retrospect, looking back, I probably would have gone with a quad, like initially, if I had known.
Right.
And then we had a smaller day, and I tried it as both a thruster and a quad, like a pretty small day, like waist high or so. And then we had the perfect day for it, kind of the in-between day. And that one I primarily rode as a quad with this fin setup that's in here right now. And that really, for my type of surfing and for this board being a little shorter than what I would normally order, allowed me to have more control.
Yeah.
But it still maintained, the speed and looseness of the board.
Sure.
But I felt a little bit more sure on bottom turns.
Okay.
That it wasn't gonna, the tail wasn't gonna give.
Right. Now, you're typically riding, let's say your high performance shortboard, 5'9", this is 5'5". This has a wider tail block, a little wider nose. I saw from turn to turn, I felt like you were just really gaining speed a lot with the wider tail block, right?
For sure. So totally, I think surfboards are always like a compromise, you know? Like if you do one thing, it might be better for help one part of your surfing, but you might compromise a little bit on the other. So this board felt great in between turns. This wider tail and probably the width through the whole board just maintained that flow.
Sure.
But then you can see on some of my turns, I was kind of overpowering it a little bit, especially towards the end of the turn, when I'm sort of losing that rail line as I'm like torquing around. And so I think, that's where for me the quad really came into play. But I have to say, for a 5'5", which I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't really normally ride, this thing performed pretty well through the turns, and I did figure out how to kind of try to hold that turn a little bit longer.
Sure. I think the other thing that I noticed on all 3 sessions that we videoed, there was a bit of wonk or bump in the water. So I feel like not having that rail line to have that traction, I saw was something that not only you were struggling with the board in general, with the conditions. Most people see the waves and it looks cleaner and easier to surf than it really is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could have been one of the things. You put this board in really clean conditions, whether it's overhead or not, I feel like it would have been a whole nother level of you just being able to put it on rail and settle it down, right?
I agree. Even though like sometimes on some of those days the surface seemed kind of smooth, there was an underlying kind of, like you said, little wonkiness to it.
Right.
And so, but I think for sure, like, yeah, in clean conditions, this thing would have just gone super well. I really like the board. I mean, the one thing for me that whenever I've gone shorter with like a shortboard model, not as opposed to more like a fish, shorter and then going like a fish type,
or a hybrid nose type board, right?
So whenever I've gone shorter but maintain this kind of where they try to keep this as like one family, is when these boards go shorter, it functionally widens your stance relative to the board.
Right.
So if they keep the rocker the same, then because you functionally kind of like widen your stance, you're surfing a different part of the board. And I feel like with a real continuous rocker on these boards, when they go smaller, they're too slow for me actually.
Right.
They start to kind of grit, like too much rocker in parts of the board. So I like this board because I think the rocker is pretty proportional to where I was standing.
Right.
Yeah, because with a shortboard I have a lot more, I'm like, my foot was like sort of here.
Right.
Shortboard, it would normally be like my 5'9", it would be here.
Right.
And so I'd be surfing on a different part of the board. But they must have taken that into account, because this board felt just normal. That was a good thing. It felt like,
that's cool.
It did feel normal.
Right.
It just felt a little shorter and wider.
One of the last things I want to mention, and I've been talking a little bit more about this to our community, is I'm more of a back-footed to neutral-footed surfer, and you're more of that neutral to heavily front-footed. So when you're driving through those turns and you don't have that rail line, I feel like that's kind of one of the things that really separates you and me as surfers.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought the way you were riding the Happy every day in those wonky conditions and driving it super hard and not having that 2 inches in length like 5'7",
Yeah.
I really felt like you could probably even go a little bit more to what you like at being a little bit longer. And I'm really speaking to the neutral to front-footed surfers. You had the hold and the traction, which you would lose that normally being a heavily front-footed surfer when you're driving, but you still had that traction, which is kind of cool.
It's great. And I think the fins really helped. And maybe you can talk about this fin setup, because quads that I've normally ridden, and I haven't ridden that many quads, definitely not as like many as you, I don't have a lot of experience, but you chose these quads as a single foil on the rear. And I feel like that makes it a little bit less pivoty, a little bit more drivey. So maybe, yeah, you could talk to that, because I did briefly try a different quad setup in here with a double foil on the back quad, and it did feel more kind of pivoty.
Right.
So,
but did you feel like you had like a sharper, more precise turn and then more drive? You're talking about drive through the turn. So what makes my fins unique is you have a neutral side fin, which is the best of both carving and pivot. It has a large base and medium fin depth. So I want maximum drive from the width of the base of the fin, but I want the board to be fast and loose because the fin doesn't go as deep into water as a large fin would on the sides.
Right.
And I took the same concept in theory to the quad rears. So with the wide base on both, there's your drive. And then this is a really pivotal quad rear, like you said, with a flat foil on the inside. And I feel like I'm still getting the best of the pivot from a thruster, but I didn't lose the drive because I've got the large base, so I can really push hard through the turns. And is that how it was feeling to you?
Yeah, I really liked it. I wasn't anxious at all in bottom turns, which is the key with a board like this for me, where there's a little bit more area here, maybe a little more lift in the tail. I wasn't, compared to the thruster, I wasn't anxious at all in bottom turns. And you never know if you're trying to like, make your surfing fit the board or make the board fit the surfing. But with this, when I was in this setup, which was my favorite fin setup for this board, I just felt like I was going to approach the wave with sort of carves, and trying to like maintain the rail most of the time. Right. When I had this as a thruster, more pivoty, I was sort of thinking, and I didn't get a lot of good weight clips like this just because I wasn't like surfing that well, but with a thruster, I was trying to get in the lip, like a quick bottom turn, get up in the lip, throw the tail. Sure. Not as much carving. So I was actually sort of, trying to tailor my approach to the wave based on the fin setup.
Sick.
Or I guess if you think about it the other way, you know, if you want to surf a certain way, throw the fins in that you want to, like, hey, I want to work on off the lips, I'll ride it as like a, you know, a thruster.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was super fun, great board, and I was stoked on it.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on the Happy Everyday. Special shout out thanks to Max for helping me with the first episode of the Pass It Around review. Now, if you guys are stoked on it and you'd like to see more like this, hit me up in the YouTube comment field below. I'm excited to get on the Happy Everyday. The full review's coming. Look, if you like the show, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and give us a thumbs up if you like our content. Until next time, we'll see you in the water. Bye-bye.